So I don't know if I'll be able to keep this promise. I kind of promised that I wouldn't cry or tear up, but there's a couple of moments that are things that I'll be talking about where I may not be able to help myself. This is such a great city, and I am just so proud to be your mayor. We have such a terrific community of marvelous individuals, and they work together. They're engaged, and and I tried to think about the State of the City address and how to describe our city in a word or two. There's a lot of things that you could say, but given everything that has happened to our city, especially this last year, the word for our city is that Millcreek is engaged. We're engaged in so many ways, and we have so many great residents who live in our community who are engaged to help make the lives of everyone around them better. And that's what makes it a special community. I want to talk, I'm going to tell a couple of stories tonight, but one story that kind of struck me, which is reflective of the way people are in our community. A couple weeks ago, I got a call from a fellow who I think lives in Canyon Rim, whose name was Jason. And Jason called me and said, I don't really know what to do. I saw a homeless individual in my front yard this morning, and he was freezing to death almost, And so I asked him to come into my house and get warm. And he said, now I'm not really sure, where I could take him where he can get some more help. And so we connected him with resources to go to one of our resource centers where there are resources available for folks like that. And then, and the other thing that he did, before he took him downtown for that, is he took him up to REI and he bought him a pair of winter boots. So that's the kind of community we have, and that's what makes this town so special. That's one example, but there are thousands of people in our community that do things like that every day. I want to when I want to talk about the various ways that I think that Millcreek is actually engaged, and there are a lot of them. So this will take a while. We're engaged in collaboration with our neighboring cities and other cities in Salt Lake County and in our state. We work with them with respect to planning matters and trying to make sure that we make the lives of all of the residents of Salt Lake County and our state better. We're engaged with our county government and with our state government. We're up there every day lobbying them and talking to them about the needs of our city and the regional needs that we have. And we're also engaged with our federal government. And I had the honor and privilege to visit all 6 members of our congressional delegation, 2 senators and 4 congressmen, in January as part of my role as the chair of the Wasatch Front Regional Council. But we're also going to go back, the whole city council is going to go back in March and lobby them with respect to city issues. And the fruit of that really is not only do we get things for our region with respect to transportation planning and things that will make our growing state better, but we also get things that benefit our city. And in the last legislative session, through our efforts, I'm very pleased that we had the support of all 6 of them to pass an appropriation to improve the trailhead at Neffs Canyon and to build some more resilient firefighting facilities up there, including a reservoir that will hold water to be able to protect our community on the urban wildlife interface. We also were able to get an act of Congress, which is something that we've talked about. Oh, that'll take an act of Congress, which meaning it's impossible, right? We got an act of Congress to actually move the federal wilderness boundary up a little bit, just a little bit, and add additional acres of wilderness in Millcreek Canyon to balance that, so that we're not out net acres of wilderness. But this will enable the construction of the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, which would be a great community resource for us, and it wouldn't have been possible without help from our friends in Congress. We're also engaged with improving the infrastructure in our city. In the past 3 years, I hope that you'll notice this because, we still have work to do and roads to fix. But in the last 3 years in Millcreek, we've been able to significantly improve 3 of our major corridors, which involved either resurfacing those roads or in some cases actually reconstructing them in the case of 39th South. So we've repaved 39th South from the far west side at 9th West of the Jordan River up to 7th East, and then the east side of it as well. So that road is all in good shape at this point. We paved Highland Drive basically from our border with Holiday, at Murray Holiday Road, all the way up to 13th East. And we will be working on Highland Drive in the future. We just have some things that are gonna change, and we didn't wanna spend your tax dollars working on that until they get done. We also repaved 1300 East from our city border at Van Winkle, basically all the way up here. So we made progress like that, and I can tell you that in this next year, we're not done, okay? We got grant funding. We will be launching into some improvements on 20th East. That's gonna take some time, but eventually there'll be sidewalks and bike lanes on that street. We're also finally got all the right-of-way acquisition to improve 900 East from 45th South to 39th South to make it look like what it looks like north of there. So complete sidewalks, bike lanes, street lighting, and new pavement. So we're working on that. You'll see a new roundabout at Skyline High School, which will improve pedestrian safety for the students that go to that new high school. And it will also improve the traffic circulation for those of you that try to get on I-215 there on 38th South or Upland. And I'm excited about that project. We will also be into phase 2 of our Neff's Lane sidewalk project, and we will be constructing another whole block of sidewalk on 33rd South, which is something that I pledged to do when I got elected, and we've been chipping away at it. But from about 1870 east to about 1950 east, you'll see new sidewalks there. The right-of-way is done, and the construction should begin this summer. In addition to that, we're continuing to try to maintain our local roads with chip seal and overlays. And if you're curious about what we've been able to accomplish in the last 3 or 4 years, or what we're going to be planning for next year, you can go to the Millcreek webpage and look under maps and see what Public Works has planned. But I'm happy that we're actually engaged in improving our infrastructure in that way. We are engaged in helping those less fortunate than many of us through our Millcreek Promise program. And this past year, we were able to expand that. We've been operating an after-school program for the kids at Millcreek Elementary for some years, but we saw a need at the Holiday Hills apartment building, and some of those kids go to William Penn Elementary, but we were able, through our Promise program and using some ARPA money that the federal government gave to the city for this kind of a purpose, to start an after-school program for those kids at Holiday Hills. So we have about 20 kids enrolled in an after-school program, which you know what that means for them is they're otherwise latchkey kids, right? And so now they have a place to go after school, where they can get additional help and support with their academic pursuits. And ultimately, that will pay benefits for Millcreek residents and residents of our state by keeping these kids productive, by making sure that they have an opportunity to graduate from high school and not wind up in places that cost us even more money in the long run. We are sad to know that Millcreek Elementary is going to close. However, we're making another Millcreek promise, which is we will help those kids no matter where they wind up. Some of them are going to be going to William Penn, and we're going to move our after-school program from Millcreek Elementary to William Penn so that those kids have support there. And we're working with our partners in South Salt Lake to make sure that the kids that might transfer to Wilson or Edison Elementary get help as well. So we're not giving up on that. We're also working with Granite School District, South Salt Lake, and United Way to focus on helping kids that graduate from these elementary schools but might attend Evergreen Junior High or Cottonwood High School. And we're going to make sure that they have the same kind of support. We want every Millcreek kid to have the opportunity to graduate from high school and attend college or trade school. And we're making progress in that goal. We are engaged also in being part of the solution to our unsheltered population and the homelessness issue that we have in this state. And I'm committed as your mayor, working with other mayors in Salt Lake County and in our state, with Wayne Niederhauser, the director of the Office of Homeless Services, to make sure that Salt Lake City and Millcreek don't become like some of the other unfortunate communities that we see around our country that have unsheltered folks everywhere, all over the street. Our willingness willingness to open up a temporary overflow shelter is helping to address that problem and actually keeping people from freezing like Jason did. And I'm happy to announce that is going pretty well right now. And that is largely thanks to the state funding that we got to provide additional police to maintain order and protect that neighborhood from adverse effects, and that's working. And I want to say something here too. There have been some critics of our having our police officers at the shelter when the people who stay there overnight arrive and when they leave. That's a promise that we made to the neighborhood around the Calvin Smith Library, that we would keep an eye on this and make sure that we didn't experience the same kind of problems in Millcreek that some of the shelters around our county have. But there was some criticism saying that police presence was intimidating to people, or it was chilling them from coming there. And I want to say I want to push back on that. I've talked with the shelter operator. I've talked with some residents that live in that shelter, and I've talked with our cops. We have a weekly stand-up meeting, 7:30 on tomorrow morning. Actually, 7:30 we meet with them, and the feedback that we're getting is actually the police presence there is actually making the people who stay there overnight feel more safe. And the other thing I want to say about our police force. Our precinct of the Unified Police Department is we have some terrific officers who are actually going above and beyond the call to help those members of our community. And I have a couple of examples of that. Detective Jared Nichols and Detective Christian Thompson are on the detail that work on that shelter, and they've had a couple of things where they've done things that are remarkable. On one of the Tuesday meetings a couple weeks ago, when I went there, there was all the people that reside there have been transported back downtown, which is what happens there, because there's no ability to feed them there. But there's a little dog in the building. This dog belonged to one of the residents who had stayed in the shelter the night before, and his owner had to be transferred to St. Mark's Hospital. He had some medical issues, and it turned out they were relatively serious. And Detective Nichols told me that they expected that he was going to be hospitalized for a couple of days. And the question arose what to do with this little dog. And while I was in there, the dog is running back and forth between the door, looking out the door, running back to the cot where his owner slept, back and forth while I'm in there for about a half an hour. And I just said, we need to take care of the situation. And Detective Nichols said, I'll take this dog down to Salt Lake County Animal Services, and I will make arrangements for them to board this dog with no charge to the owner. And then another above and beyond the call thing that Detective Nichols did is when this fellow was released from the hospital, he was notified. He went and picked the guy up, took him to the shelter, got him his dog back with no boarding fee and all that. And that's above and beyond the call. I have another episode like that where a gentleman at our shelter expressed to one of our officers that he was disoriented. He said, I've never been in a city as big as Salt Lake City. I'm from a little town in Utah County, and I'm really kind of out of my element here, and I don't know what to do. And it turns out that an agency in Utah County had purchased this gentleman a front runner ticket and sent him north to us. And Detective Christian Thompson, talking to this guy, basically learned that he would rather be back in Utah County where he was familiar, so he drove him back home. And there again, that's something that is remarkable and kind of thing makes our community great. I want to say that Millcreek is also engaged with the Unified Police Department. These are episodes of the kind of policing that we get from our officers who are highly trained and excellent officers. There's a bill in the legislature which might create some chaos for the Unified Police Department, and we're going to oppose that bill. I really believe that our community receives the benefit of economies of scale by sharing police officers with other communities. And we have our own officers in our precinct, but we have the resources of the second largest police department in the state to come into Millcreek when we need them. And those are, some of you may remember when we did need them, when we had the hostage situation on Highland Drive and 39th South. If we had a Millcreek Police Department, we would never be able to marshal the resources that we had. So we're going to fight for UPD. We're going to fight for those efficiencies. And I want to say to any of our officers in the Millcreek precinct or the Unified Police Department, they can be sure that Millcreek is a UPD city and will remain so as long as I have anything to say about it. I also want to talk a little bit about what we've done with our police department and what our police department has done to address some of the concerns around policing that have been arisen since the troubles that we had in 2020 with George Floyd and a number of other incidents after that. You know, a number of people, and we had a policing committee in our city, and we talked to people about what they felt should be done about policing, if anything. And, you know, one of the things that came up time and time again is that very often our officers are asked to respond to calls that are really mental health issues that might be more appropriately handled by someone else other than a police officer. Well, knowing that some of those incidences can also be dangerous, we don't want to send in a social worker by themselves when somebody's armed. And so our strategy has been to put a mental health person with mental health expertise with our police in the response so that we've got all the bases covered. And this program has been up and running now for about a year. And actually, our police chief asked me if we would fund our own officer into that mental health unit, and our council agreed to do that. So we have our own officer, Tracy Crino, in that unit. And I want to just talk a little bit about the impact of that unit. I received an email from a Millcreek resident, and I'm not going to read it all because it's pretty long, but this is what we're doing, okay? She writes to me and she says that 9 years ago, our family's struggle with my daughter's mental illness began. She was 13 years old at the time and had pretty severe bipolar depression and anxiety. And she basically talked about how her daughter started cutting herself. And as a mother, she just didn't know how to deal with that. She said it was incredibly frightening and shocking as a mother to see your child doing this to herself. And then she also related that 2 to 4 times a year they would have to call 911 because the circumstance would be so they didn't know what to do and how to control it. So they would call and the police would respond. And she said the police did their best when they arrived, but each and every time was the same. De-escalation followed by restraining her and taking her to the hospital. Every time she was treated not like a criminal, but with a very regimented and cut and dried handling of things. And we, her parents, were left feeling very isolated. She said that around last time this year, things were bad for her again and we needed to call the police. Her daughter was threatening to kill herself and was spinning out of control. A few police officers arrived to de-escalate, and then one of them stayed to talk with her. It seemed to us like he had some training on how to talk with someone with mental illness. De-escalation was kinder and gentler and more engaging. He knew how to really calm her down and to get her to listen to him. And she's now 21 and has to make the decision to get more treatment herself. But this officer provided her with resources for different treatment options and followed up the next day to see how things were. Not only that, a few days later, a police officer and a social worker showed up at our house to follow up with her and her well-being. Furthermore, and what was a catalyst to me writing this email, we've received calls every couple of months from an officer checking in on her and seeing how they can support her well-being. So the point of this is that our police department is now engaged in trying to not just respond to an episode, but to follow up and make sure that to the extent that they can, that people get additional help. And that's super important and saves taxpayers money because a lot of these mental health issues result in repeated calls to the police when they really aren't equipped to handle it. So by having some case management and helping people actually get to some resources, we're saving taxpayers dollars, but more importantly, we're helping the residents of our community. Our community has also, I think, been engaged with our community in being, transparent and having a transparent dialogue with you, our taxpayers. We've hosted, we do the written newsletter, we do the electronic newsletter. If you haven't signed up for the electronic newsletter and you get email, I hope you will sign up on the city's webpage. But we also have had a pretty tough year. We had to raise taxes. We had town hall meetings and truth and taxation hearings, and we've tried to explain to you, the constituents of Millcreek, why we felt we had to do that in order to keep pace with the wage wars and police salaries, and actually paying our officers a competitive wage is important to keeping the great officers we have, as I just mentioned, and to be able to recruit and retain new ones. So thank you for being supportive of the tough decisions that we had to make in that arena. Our city is also engaged with community building. I don't know if you noticed, but we have a little development across the street here. Millcreek Common has actually been wildly successful. We generated about $178,000 in skate rentals and in ice time fees in the month of December. That's a lot of skate rentals. And about $100,000 in January. Now, we're not trying to make money on this proposition, but those revenues offset the cost of operating it. And there's a cost to operating every park, right? But the thing that I'm happy about is that what we've said all along is we built this as a community gathering place, and it's working. It's working. And we're going to be, you can see City Hall rising. We're going to have to move out of this building and in end of August or September. We'll probably stretch it to when our building's done. But this has been a great place to be to start out as a city. I'm going to thank Fred Healy for helping us find the location. We'll talk about Fred later, but this building also has its limitations. The heating system is just awful, and for our folks to work in this building, I can tell you that they will give you better service when they have better facilities. And our police department will as well. Our police department will occupy the third floor of City Hall, so they'll be accessible to Millcreek Common. They'll be able to integrate and interact more with members of our city staff, and also the public on Millcreek Common. They'll be out there. So I think that this is all an investment in our community, and I think our community is also going to love the ground floor public market and the top floor, sixth floor community room that'll be available for all of us to use for community events, something that we really don't have beyond the Millcreek Library, which doesn't seat enough people. So we're doing a lot of stuff like that, and I think that while there have been doubters on it, I've tried to explain how we're paying for that with bonds, and that tax increment from the whole development will gift that to us without Millcreek taxpayers having to pay for the common. And we will pay rent for City Hall, but we will save rent here, and we will save rent for our UPD police headquarters, and the buildings will be far more efficient. Our community is also engaged in environmental sustainability. We are continuing to pursue a renewable energy future with the participation of multiple other cities in our state through the Community Renewable Energy Agency. We are exploring that to make sure that the rate increase won't be burdensome for Millcreek residents, and we have an eye on that. But it looks like it's coming in where it might be more affordable than we originally even thought. So we may have a renewable energy future for Millcreek residents by 2030. Our City Hall will be covered in solar panels, courtesy of a grant from Rocky Mountain Power Blue Sky program. And someday we'll have solar panels on the carports over the parking garage, and there'll be plenty of EV charging stations. We're engaged in other types of environmental work to make sure that our building codes are up to date, our zoning is up to date. We're using best practices regarding water conservation. We're making our ordinances are already suitable so that Millcreek residents can get subsidies to turn their grass turf into xeriscaping. So we have an eye on that, and we're engaged in sustainability. We're engaged in the health of our residents as well. We adopted in the city a health and all policies rule, which basically says that everything that comes before our staff and the city council, we look to see how does this affect the health of Millcreek residents? How does this improve our health? We've also, in the last year and a half, been able to acquire additional 140 acres of open space on Granger Beak, and I'm happy to announce that the Bonneville Shoreline Trail between Parley's Canyon and Millcreek Canyon is 1/3 completed, and as soon as the elk decide to move off that range, we'll finish that trail and have 2 more miles of BST for Millcreek residents and everybody in our county to enjoy. The other great thing that we're doing for our West Side residents is completing the Jordan River Trail on the Millcreek side of the river. And that trail is paved now. And this summer we will be putting a bridge across the Jordan River so that you can get to the Taylorsville side more easily. And then within the next year or two, you'll see a pavilion and bathrooms go up on the Millcreek side right by 39 South. And I think our planning commission is going to be considering the concept for a boat ramp to be able to launch canoes or kayaks into the river on the Millcreek side. So that's a great recreational amenity and something that will promote the health of everybody in the county, but particularly those on our west side that may be more limited by transportation. It's right at their doorstep. We remain engaged, I guess I'd say, in fighting the construction of a new limestone quarry in Parley's Canyon. And that matter is moved to the courts right now, but Millcreek will continue to participate in that. We will intervene in that lawsuit to protect the air quality, particularly for our Canyon Rim neighborhood, but for the whole county with respect to the dust that facility would put into our airshed. We are engaged also in careful budgeting and the city's fiscal health. That's, I know, important to all Millcreek residents, but in spite of the fact that we had to increase taxes solely for the purpose of paying for police salaries, our city is otherwise fiscally healthy. We remain on a sound financial footing. We still have a rainy day fund or fund balance that is currently sitting at 34% of our annual budget. So that's 1% short of the state's maximum. And that fund actually gives us the flexibility to be nimble when an opportunity arises. It also helps us to cover an emergency, or if the economy should turn and tax revenues go down, we'll have a cushion. So thanks to our finance staff and thanks to the discipline of this council, our city is in excellent financial condition. And we're engaged, I think also I can say proudly, in providing the best service that we can to our residents. And I share with our city staff the emails, good and bad. But we get far more emails from the people that interact with our city staff thanking us for the fact that when we get an application that has some problems, we don't reject it. We meet with the applicant and say, this is what's wrong with your application, and this is how you might consider fixing it to either comply with our code or make the project better based upon the regulatory environment we operate on. I'm proud that we have established a staff in this city and a culture where we say that we are problem solvers, not bureaucrats. Our employees, and this is a lean operation, okay? We don't have near the number of employees of other communities. And, part of that is because we contract with UPD for police. We contract with Salt Lake County Public Works. We manage those contracts. We determine the level of service that we get so that we make sure that our snow plowing is still what we want. I had somebody the other day talk to me about Imperial just up the street here saying, I can tell exactly where the boundary is between Salt Lake City and Millcreek because the road is snow plowed in Millcreek. So, but our staff manages that, and they do it in a way where they're cross-trained. We cover for each other. If somebody's busy at the front desk, then somebody else will come out and help people. We meet with people out in this lobby every day to try to help them solve their problems. And, we can't solve every problem. There's some people that ask for a bridge too far, right? They ask for something that we can't do under code. But to the extent that we can be helpful to somebody or point them in the right direction, that's our goal. Our goal is to be an entrepreneurial city, and we don't have the way it's always been done in Millcreek. which frees us from some of the bureaucratic stuff and enables us to actually provide you with better service. So, as always, if you see where we're coming up short, we want to hear that. I want to hear that. I have office hours on Friday afternoons if you ever want to come and talk to me. Many of you have. But we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I'm certainly more interested in how I can be a better mayor and how our city can provide better services to you and how we can continue to remain engaged in our community.